I used to believe every sacrifice I made would mean something in the end. Every sleepless night in my dorm, every skipped party, every final exam that felt like a mountain I had to climb alone, I thought it would all be worth it the day I walked across the stage at MIT. The day I finally proved to myself, and to my family, that I wasn't just the quiet one, or the responsible one, or the sister who never caused trouble. I was someone. I had achieved something extraordinary. And deep down, even after years of being overshadowed, I still hoped they'd be there to see it. Graduation morning smelled like rain and spring flowers. There was a nervous buzz in the air, a mix of joy and endings and new beginnings. My classmates were surrounded by families holding bouquets, balloons, cameras, tears. Me? I held my phone. I kept checking it every few seconds. We're on our way. Traffic is crazy, but we'll be there soon. Something. Anything. Nothing came. Still, I held on to hope like a child gripping the corner of a blanket. My cap felt too tight. My gown felt too heavy. But nothing felt heavier than the thought that they wouldn't come, not again, not today. Growing up, my parents had a way of prioritizing my sister in a way that didn't even feel intentional anymore. It was just the natural order of things. Her competitions, her recitals, her endless list of urgent events always came first. I was used to it, birthday dinners cut short, school awards missed, parent-teacher meetings attended halfway. They always said, "We'll make it up to you." But they never did. When the ceremony finally began, I looked out at the sea of families, faces glowing with pride. Row 14, Seat B. That was where they were supposed to sit. I had marked it on the seating chart they emailed me a week earlier. I memorized it like scripture. Row 14, Seat B. Empty. My name echoed over the loudspeakers. Summa cum laude, mechanical engineering. Arya Khan. I walked across the stage to applause that didn't belong to me, cheers from people who didn't even know my name. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would break through my chest and shatter on the ground. I smiled for the photos. The dean shook my hand. The cameras flashed. And then I looked again. Row 14, Seat B. Still empty. After the ceremony, when everyone else was embraced by their families, drowning in congratulations and flowers and love, I stood alone holding my diploma like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My phone buzzed. Finally. A text from my mother. Just 5 words. 5 words that sliced through me sharper than anything life had ever thrown at me. Couldn't make it. Ballet Recital. That was it. No apology. No explanation. No pride. No love. My sister, the golden child, had a ballet recital scheduled at the same time, and apparently the choice hadn't even been difficult for them. A recital they'd seen 100 times. Over the moment I had worked for my entire adult life. I don't remember crying. I just remember feeling something inside me go quiet. A silence I'd never felt before. A silence that wasn't sadness. It was something colder. Something final. That night, I packed my things in my dorm room with slow, steady hands. I deleted their numbers. I blocked them on everything. I removed myself from the family group chat without a word. I folded the text message neatly in my mind. Like a paper cut out of a life I no longer wanted to participate in. And then, I whispered to myself, out loud, for the first time in my life. This is the last time they get to break me. I didn't leave with anger. I didn't leave with tears. I left with realization. I had shown up for myself. Even when they hadn't. And as I closed the dorm door behind me, I knew. I had just walked away from my family. And they had no idea they'd lost me. The first morning after I cut my parents out of my life felt strangely quiet. No calls. No texts. No family drama vibrating through my phone like it always used to. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing myself for disappointment. The silence didn't hurt, it felt like breathing clean air after living in a smoke-filled room. But freedom has a way of exposing the wounds you never treated. And for a long time, I didn't realize how deeply they had carved insecurity into my bones. After graduation, I moved across the country to a tiny apartment in Seattle. It wasn't glamorous, peeling paint, squeaky floorboards, a heater that sounded like it was dying every night, but it was mine. My life finally belonged to me, and that alone made the place feel like luxury. I threw myself into work. That's what I knew how to do best. My first engineering job barely paid enough to survive, but I stayed late every night anyway. I volunteered for projects no one wanted. I studied patents on weekends. I attended every workshop, every seminar, every networking event. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because dedicating myself to something real kept me from wondering whether my parents ever thought about me at all. Turns out, burying yourself in ambition is one of the easiest ways to forget heartbreak. The first year was survival. The second year was growth. By the third year, I had built something extraordinary. A prototype I designed, a compact, affordable, fault detection system for renewable energy grids, caught the attention of investors. One meeting turned into 3. 3 turned into 12. And suddenly, I was the co-founder of a startup no one believed in at first, except me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in my sister's shadow. I wasn't the responsible one or the quiet achiever. I was a leader. A creator. A woman shaping her own future. And I was damn good at it. Investors came. Funding came. Recognition came. Success hit me faster than I was ready for, and slower than I deserved. But even with everything I built, healing wasn't a straight line. Sometimes I'd see a mother hugging her daughter at a cafe and feel a sting deep in my ribs. Sometimes I'd hear someone argue with their parents on the phone and find myself jealous they even had that connection, even if it was messy. Sometimes I'd lie awake wondering if my parents kept my room the same, or if they had already erased me like I'd erased their numbers. But every time those thoughts surfaced, I reminded myself. They made their choice long before I made mine. They chose my sister's dance recitals, her events, her needs, over my milestones, my dreams, my heart, for years. Graduation was only the final straw, not the first. I hadn't abandoned them. I had freed myself from them. And slowly, that truth became easier to believe. By the fourth year, our startup was valued at $30 million. By the fifth year, we crossed $70 million. And at 26, I made it onto a list I once thought only belonged to people who had perfect families cheering them on. Forbes 30 Under 30, Energy and Engineering. I almost laughed when I saw my photo on their website. Not out of pride, but because I knew, with absolute certainty, that my parents had no idea. They didn't know the company I built. They didn't know the woman I'd become. They didn't know the life I lived now. A life that didn't include them, their disappointment, or their absence. They didn't know what they had lost. But the rest of the world did. Then, in the fifth year, when I finally felt whole. When my life was the quiet, stable universe I had always wanted. I received a message that cracked open a door I had welded shut. A simple email from my cousin's fiancé. We would be honored if you attended our wedding. Everyone will be there. It won't be the same without you. Everyone. Meaning my parents. My sister. The people who had once mattered more than anything. And now meant almost nothing at all. I stared at the invitation for 15 minutes, feeling the old wounds pulse beneath my skin. But the difference was this. They no longer had the power to hurt me. Not anymore. Not after everything I built without them. So I clicked accept. Not for them. But for me. Because after 5 years of rebuilding what they broke, I was finally strong enough to face the people who never showed up for me. And show them exactly who I had become without them. 5 years is a long time to go without seeing the people who shaped your entire childhood. Long enough for memories to soften. but not long enough for wounds to fully disappear. So when I stepped out of the car outside the hotel hosting my cousin's wedding, I felt a tightness in my chest, not fear, not sadness, but something cold and steady. A kind of strength I had earned. The entrance was strung with golden lights, violins hummed from the ballroom, and relatives I hadn't seen in years floated around like glittering ghosts. I smoothed my dress, fixed my posture, and walked in like a woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece. No more shrinking. No more being the background character in my own life. Today, they would see me, whether they liked it or not. When I entered the ballroom, my cousin's face lit up. "Arya. You came," she whispered, hugging me so tightly I almost forgot why I'd stayed away so long. Almost. But as soon as she pulled back, her eyes flicked over my shoulder and widened. I didn't have to turn around to know. They were behind me. My parents. My sister. The people I once would have crossed oceans for. People who couldn't cross a city to attend my graduation. I turned slowly, steadying my breath. There they stood. My father was the first to freeze, mid-step, mid-breath, mid-thought. My mother's hand tightened on her clutch as if bracing for impact. And my sister. She looked everywhere except at me. Guilt finds interesting places to hide. Like the floor, the corners, anywhere that isn't the eyes of the person you hurt. For a moment, no one moved. It was almost comical. 5 years of silence, unresolved pain, and unanswered questions collapsing into a single, heavy pause. I didn't speak. Didn't smile. Didn't frown. I simply looked at them like they were strangers who vaguely resembled the people I used to call family. My father finally broke the stillness. "Arya, you look different." "I grew up," I replied. It was the gentlest truth I could offer. They expected me to walk toward them. They expected the old version of me, the obedient daughter who always folded first, to return in that moment. But that girl didn't exist anymore. So I turned back to my cousin. "Show me where to sit," I said with a soft smile. My parents watched, stunned, as my cousin linked her arm in mine and guided me through the crowd. People whispered, of course they did. Everyone in my family knew what happened 5 years ago. No one talked about it, but the silence was its own language. I took my seat at the front, not far from the main stage. A place of honor. My parents and sister? 2 tables behind me. Their distance wasn't just physical. It was history. And for once, I didn't feel like the forgotten one. They were the ones feeling forgotten. Throughout the ceremony, I caught them looking at me, quick glances, heavy with something I couldn't decipher at first. Was it guilt? Shock? Regret? Maybe all 3. My sister kept rubbing her wrist nervously. She used to do that as a child when she was hiding something. I wondered if she still danced, still performed, still stood center stage while I stood far behind. My mother looked like she wanted to cry. My father looked like he was calculating damage. But none of them approached me. Not yet. They weren't prepared for who I had become. During dinner, my aunt insisted I sit next to her. "You've grown into a force," she whispered proudly. "Your parents must be so confused?" I offered. She stifled a laugh. "That too." A few minutes later, she asked, "Do they know about your company?" I shook my head. "They don't know anything about me," I said. "They made it very easy to disappear." I didn't say it with bitterness. Only with truth. My aunt's expression softened. "They lost so much." I shrugged lightly. "They didn't notice then," I said. "Why should they notice now?" But the moment that hit the hardest came during the first dance. My cousin danced with her father, glowing with the comfort of being loved. The room swelled with emotion. I didn't cry. I didn't ache. But I felt something shift inside me, a quiet acceptance that I had parented myself into the woman I became. And in the soft golden lighting, I finally saw it. My parents were staring at me the way people stare at something precious. something they dropped once. And only realized the value of when it shattered. They looked at me like I was something they desperately wanted back. But were terrified to approach. For the first time in my life, they were the ones who didn't know how to reach me. And I realized right then. This wasn't their room anymore. It was mine. 5 years ago, I had walked away from them broken. Tonight, they saw someone they could no longer recognize. Someone stronger, calmer, untouchable. Tonight, they finally felt the absence of the daughter who had spent her whole life feeling invisible. Tonight, they began to understand what they had truly lost. And I hadn't even spoken to them yet. That moment was only the beginning. The wedding was alive with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses, but my eyes kept finding them, my parents and my sister, sitting stiffly 2 tables behind me, whispering among themselves. They hadn't approached. They hadn't even tried. And in that, I found the first taste of my revenge. Not shouting. Not confrontation. Not drama. Just indifference. They were staring at me like a masterpiece that had been locked away for years, suddenly unveiled. Only now, it was too late for them to touch it. After dinner, I wandered the ballroom, greeting relatives, catching up with old friends, laughing freely, and savoring the warmth of belonging. Every smile I shared, every compliment I received, felt like a small victory over the years they had ignored me. Eventually, I found myself near the bar, a glass of champagne in hand, and there they were, my mother, nervously fidgeting with her clutch, my father pacing slightly, and my sister pretending not to notice me. I could see it clearly now. They were the ones holding their breath, waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to shrink back into the obedient daughter they'd known before. But that girl had died 5 years ago. I approached them calmly, a soft smile on my lips, and said only what needed to be said. "Hello. It's been a long time." My mother's lips trembled. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. My sister's eyes widened as if I'd suddenly grown taller, not in height, but in presence. And then I said the words that carried all the weight of my absence, all the years of quiet endurance, and all the nights I had cried myself to sleep because they chose her over me. I waited for you to show up for me, and you didn't. I waited for you to see me, and you didn't. I waited for you to love me, and you chose someone else. There was a pause. A heavy, suffocating pause that made them all realize the enormity of what they had done. "I forgive you," I said, almost whispering. "But I will never forget. And I will never let you back into the life I built for myself." It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't spite. It was justice. It was calm. It was truth. They looked at me, helpless, wanting to protest, to argue, to convince me they had always loved me, but I didn't give them the chance. I simply turned away, raising my glass in a quiet toast to myself, to my resilience, and to a life where I was finally the priority. And as I walked back to my table, laughing with my cousins, basking in the warmth of the family who had always valued me, I felt it. The sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's being someone they can no longer claim. It's being a woman who thrives without their approval. It's living a life so full and brilliant that they can only watch from a distance, realizing too late what they lost. Later that night, as the wedding drew to a close and guests hugged and said goodbye, my parents lingered, trying one last time to bridge the gap. My sister's hand brushed mine in a timid, awkward gesture. I smiled, not cruelly, not coldly, but with serenity and certainty. "I have everything I need," I said softly. "And you?" "You've already lost me." I walked away into the night, the lights of the city glowing like promises I had made to myself and kept. For the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking their attention, their approval, or their love. I had built my own. And that, more than anything, was the sweetest revenge of all. Because they didn't just miss my graduation 5 years ago. They missed out on me. Forever.